Right then, folks, it's 8:30, so good morning, and I think we'll get going. I'm Joanne Briggs. I'm the Operations Director at NSA, and really excited this morning to be hosting the NSA Breakfast Club. For those of you who are joining the Breakfast Club for the first time, welcome. For those of you who've been tuning in each week, I hope you've been enjoying the topics. We've had some really great speakers so far, and next week, actually next Wednesday morning, we've got Tony Juniper from the Environment from Natural England joining us, which is going to be a particular coup. So yeah, keep tuning in every Wednesday. We're going to keep going with these topics. It seems to be popular with folks who are joining in. But this morning, I'm very excited to be introducing some exceptional young sheep farmers who won the NSA Samuel Worry Memorial Award for the Next Generation, an award that saw them travel around the world and summarise their findings over 2019 and 2020, when the world was quite a different place and we could actually leave the country. And we're looking forward to a real boost this morning, actually, because remembering what it was like to get out there and do some international travel, and hopefully make us all excited and eager to be doing it again when we're allowed to and restrictions ease. So just to say, we're recording everything today. So if you know anyone who's missed it and wants to tune back in at a later time, or indeed wants to watch back on the topics that we've done with the NSA Breakfast Club earlier in the series, all of our webinars are on the website. So nationalsheep.org.uk/webinars, you'll find everything there. Now, before I introduce Charlie and Marie, who are our two presenters this morning, I will just briefly describe what it is that they won, that the travel bursaries that they took part in. It was the NSA Samuel Worry Memorial Award for the Next Generation. And Sam was only 56 when he died suddenly in May 2017. He was partway through his term as NSA chairman, a fairly recent instigator of an innovative share farming agreement, and a man who was passionate about science and technology. He was particularly genetics. He was really into his blackie breeding. He'd been a supporter of the NSA Next Generation initiative since its very inception, and so it was really fitting that when we lost him so early, that we added this exciting addition to the Next Generation program with this travel bursary. I'm not going to go into all of the Next Generation stuff now, but there's a lot of exciting things that happen under the NSA Next Generation banner, in addition to the travel bursary. The ambassador program people will have heard of, the young shepherd competitions that we've got a good reputation for, matchmaking services advice. There's lots there under the Next Generation banner. So anyone who feels they could benefit from that, or know people who could, then we're always here. Our door is always open. When we initially decided we were going to offer this award, we didn't really have any funding. NSA very tentatively said we would offer a £1,000 travel bursary, knowing that wouldn't get people a huge distance around the world, but it'd certainly be a good seed to start them on their travels. So we're incredibly grateful that after we initially announced we were going to do this, the Company of Merchants of the Staple of England then got on board and joined us. They allowed us to more than double the money that we put in for 2 people, not 1, which was just incredible, a really amazing opportunity to be able to offer to 2 young people. And I'm pleased to say that Stephen Fell from the Staple is going to join us at the end of this webinar and just say a few words before we all finish up. So our 2 recipients for the 2019-2020 award were Charlie Beattie from Warwickshire and Marie Preble from Kent, and they're going to share their findings today, make us really jealous with some fantastic pictures and information from their findings from New Zealand, Charlie, and from Norway and Iceland for Marie. Just a little bit of quick housekeeping before we get going. So Charlie's going to speak first. She's going to do a presentation. We'll have time for a couple of questions after that. And then Marie is going to do her presentation, and we'll have a couple of questions specifically for Marie. Then we're going to have a good session for questions and answers afterwards. So please do put your questions forward. Charlie and Marie have not talked about their awards anywhere near as much as they would have done if coronavirus hadn't come along. We had them teed up to speak at every NSA event that was planned, and they haven't been able to do that. So put them on, keep them on their toes today. Get them all the questions they should have had over several events. Let's cram them in this morning. So for those of you who have been doing these webinars on a regular basis, you'll be familiar with how it works, but please use the Q&A option on Zoom to ask your questions. If you put a question in chat, I might see it, but the chances are I won't. So make sure you put it in the Q&A section. Depending on what device you're using, you'll find that towards the bottom of your screen. I'll keep an eye on those. I'll pose them to the panelists, and if we miss anything at all, hopefully we won't, but we can always come back to them afterwards if we do. So, and also, just in case we don't have time to go over this at the end, I don't want to miss this bit, is that the Staple and NSA are hoping to work together again to launch to continue with the award and launch applications for another set of awards in late summer 2021. We're saying we're going to do it, but we're being a little bit hesitant about timings at the moment, because obviously we don't want to be, well, we can't be encouraging people to do any overseas travel at the moment. But when we do it later this year, when we do make an official announcement and get some dates out there, all the information will be on the NSA Next Generation website, which you've got up there on your screens. Right, so I'll stop babbling on and we'll get on to the real business, which is to hand over to Charlie, who's going to tell us about her trip to New Zealand, what she found out while she was there, how she's applied it to her own sheep farming enterprise back at home, and also any other tips that she can give to other folks in a similar situation. So I will switch my camera off, Charlie, and it's completely over to you. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Just work out how to do the screen sharing. So can you all see that?
Yep, just press your lock. There you go.
There we go. Wicked. It's a good start. So I'm going to start off. Obviously, I have to just express a huge thank you to the NSA and the company of the Merchants of the Staple of England for the incredible opportunity. Yeah, you know, it's an incredible amount of money and it was an incredible trip. So big thank you. So firstly, a bit about me. I am farming born and bred. I couldn't tell you how far back farming goes in our family. It's a long way. Yeah, I'm a tenant farmer here in Warwickshire. I am a Harper Adams University graduate, so I graduated in 2017, and it won't shock any of you to hear that I did a Bachelor of Science in Agriculture. So for my part of my degree, we had to do a placement year, and I actually worked for CLASS as a machinery demonstrator. So I was based in Lincolnshire. So and it was, yeah, sales and demonstration assistance. So a far cry from livestock, which was definitely my comfort at home. And then once graduated, I travelled Australia and New Zealand and spent most of my time working for Lampower, which is the company that owns the CLASS franchise out there. So I ran CLASS Lexion, so the combine harvester demonstrations out there, which was absolutely incredible. I had an amazing time, and yeah, nothing will ever replace the feeling of turning up at a demonstration. The salesman's told the farmer that Charlie is bringing out the demo machine, and their jaw hits the floor when they realise that Charlie is female, not male. So yeah, that was great. Thoroughly enjoyed that. I came home in spring 2019. So I came home at the start of April, and I've been farming alongside my dad and my uncle ever since. So we've been here. We rent the farm off Packington Estate, and my granddad took on the tenancy in the late 1950s. And yeah, so we've built on the area of land that we rent, and we've also developed a contracting business. So we have suckler beef, sheep, and then the arable and the contracting. So yeah, okay, so the project outline, my title there, improvement and utilisation of permanent pasture to reduce the cost on UK sheep farms. Now, permanent pasture makes up 40% of UK farmland, so you know that's huge. We've got to just make the most of it as we can. The utilisation is a measure of what is eaten compared to what is grown, and it can be maximised by implementing better grazing strategies, ensuring it's grazed at the right time, the right height, with the right amount of stock, and equally important, allowing it to rest and recover for long enough. I'm sure I'm telling you lots of things that you all already know here. So this project, my project title was decided on, or roughly decided on, as part of my application. So this was back in May 2019. So my reasons for this were very predominantly along the fact that agriculture had such an uncertain future at the time. We were in the midst of Brexit negotiations. No deal was still very much a possibility. We've got the government's target of net zero by 2050, the NFU's target of net zero by 2040, the loss of support payments and subsidies. So of course, we're moving now towards a public money for public goods, ELMS, and nobody really, although things have been outlined, none of us really actually know what's coming, what's going to happen, how much money is going to be in the pot. So really, a lot of what I wanted to do was look at ways that we could reduce cost of production, but equally reduce the risk to our businesses. So still be able to produce, at a lower risk, as I said. So I think, especially a lot of the time when you look at agriculture, or maybe it's just on social media, a lot of people are very much focused on yields, and I think that focus really needs to shift from yields to margins. You know, it's all well and good getting the highest land price, the highest yield of wheat. You know, it's all well and good, but if it costs you too much to produce, then, as we all know, that doesn't make sense. So as well as reducing risk, food security is a massive problem at the moment, whether the government is really backing farmers as it should be, bearing in mind we produce around 64% of the food we consume in the UK. Can we be producing more? The answer is most likely. People are very much used to out of season goods now, and goods that we can't produce in the UK, which is all well and good, but seasonality and a seasonal diet is long gone. But that increase in population, it's due to be 70 million by 2040. So, you know, that's huge. We're at around 66 million now. And then consumer awareness is a big one as well. So a growing percentage of consumers are now more attentive than ever to the carbon footprint of their diets. And here in the UK, we are so suited to that pasture-fed, mixed farming system, which is just so suited to that carbon sequestration and to those climate friendly diets. It's a real marketing point for us, probably one we need to take a little bit more of an interest in promoting. Consumer awareness, a big one. So my trip, I'm not going to go through all of the farms that I visited because we've only got 20 minutes. So so I started out, once I heard that I got the scholarship, started out, and the NSA provided me with contacts and certain people I knew through friends of friends. It's not what you know, it's who you know, as we all say. And social media was a massive one. So I'm not massive on Twitter, but I'm one of those people that kind of lurks and watches what other people say. But I put a tweet out there, and I mentioned that this is what I was doing. I asked people to retweet it, and before you know it, I was inundated with responses and offers of people, New Zealand farmers offering to put me up for however many nights and show me around. So I kind of looked through all the responses, got them to send me a bit of information about their farming system, picked the most suitable ones. So I tried to pick a mixture of like hill and upland, big stations, and then smaller ones. So I went from the largest property I visited was 6,200 hectares, which is mind-blowing. You're stood on the top and in the middle, and everything you see around you is owned by them. It's insane. Down to 200 hectares, which was very lowland and not very permanent pasture dominated. It was a lot of reseeding and forage cropping, but it was very interesting just to see the difference and compare. So I had 6 weeks away from home. I flew out on the 2nd of January, landed on the 4th of January, and I was there away from home for 6 weeks. So it was about 5.5 weeks when you include the travel time. I covered 9 farms. It was originally meant to be 12, but due to like dates clashing and whatnot, it was down to 9, which in the end thoroughly suited me, because I think I got to about 4.5 weeks in, and I realized I was absolutely shattered because it had just been so full on and busy all the time. So I landed, and I started in the North Island. So I did 3 farms in the North Island, and I pretty much just tried as hard as I could to slot in with what they were doing on the farm at the time. So I didn't want to be a hindrance or anything, so I spent a lot of days drafting lambs, and I did a lot of drafting lambs, and they draft lambs really, really quick out there. I spent a few days gathering sheep on the hills, which was incredible. Like, just it's just a whole nother scale out there. Like, we're lowland here, so that was, especially for me, that was a very drastic change. And Jesus, the strength in their legs, they can just scale up those hills, and I'm there puffing behind. And I've always liked to think I was quite fit, but that really tested it. And then I spent a lot of days moving stock, so opening gates. I was definitely chief gate opener for a lot of my time, and just moving different mobs of stock between paddocks. There was an awful lot of time spent doing that, and that was probably the best bit, because you're going around, and we'd be going around in a buggy like in the photo, and you can just keep firing questions as they come at the farmer, which, yeah, it was brilliant. Like, I saw some amazing sights. So that's just to kind of give you an idea of the area I covered. And like I said earlier, I'm not going to go through each farm individually because there's just way too much. So I started in Auckland, and I spent a night just outside of Auckland, just to kind of recover from the jet lag. Turns out a night doesn't really do it. And then I was straight down to Ian and Shelley Jew Hopkins at Wanganui, well, just north of Wanganui. And they are very much they're a real mixture. So they've got some really good lowland land, which they forage crop to finish lambs on, but then they've also got the sheer hills. So that was, yeah, a really good introduction. So yeah, and that's pretty much the order that I visited them in. At the bottom, you can see it kind of gets a bit mixed around, and I was up and down quite a lot, but yeah, they were all the farms I covered. And then I flew back out of Auckland, so I drove all the way down and then had to drive all the way back up again. So my findings, I'm not going to teach you to suck eggs. There's absolutely nothing groundbreaking, and it's nothing we're not all reading about all the time, and nothing that we're not all seeing about. It's probably just that things, and it does come with scale. You know, some of these farmers were on an absolutely huge scale, but it's maybe that they were doing them better in some ways. They've got different allowances to the way they can farm. So everywhere I went, grazing strategy was the main tool. So every farmer I asked, they were like, yeah, it's my grazing management. That is how thanks, Joe. That's how I maintain and get the best out of my pasture. So we all know there's a really fine line between overgrazing and undergrazing. They are watching pasture covers like a hawk. And I found it really interesting that everywhere I went, they really split down their flocks and the way they grazed with what animals. So most farms, they would graze the lambs on first, and then they'd follow. So they wouldn't graze it down until it needed to be rested again. They'd let the lambs go on, have their pick. So they'd have 2 days on. However, they'd have a while on, take their pick. Then they'd have a light mob of ewes. So yeah, ewes that had weaned off and were just body condition scored lower than they should be. And then they'd follow with the main mob of ewes, and then finally they'd follow with cattle. Now, cattle are viewed completely differently out in New Zealand. They are just viewed as toppers that have the bonus of producing a calf each year. So for the farmer, cattle are a win-win situation. They don't have to use the diesel, and they get the calf as further profit. They're all very good at their soil testing. They're past kind of just testing the pH. They're doing it and renewing and reseeding. I'll flick on because my 5-minute warning. Applying the findings. So at home, we've typically always pretty much set stocked. And now we're a mixed farm. We have the arable too, so it's definitely a case of the sheep have always fit around the arable and the cattle to a certain extent. But that was when there was Dad and Tom. So now I'm home, there's 3 of us, and there's just a bit more labour and someone to go out and move electric fences. So that's definitely something that I'm very focused on improving. Soil testing. So I've persuaded them that we are going to move away from just doing the lime. We're going to look every few years, look a bit more at what our soil is telling us. And, that's often a way to help reduce weed burdens as well. So we'll see. And then we also overseeded about 45 acres last year on our lower producing, mainly silage ground, but also a bit of grazing land as well. And we're yet to see the results from that, or the improvements. UK wide, so yeah, know your soils, like I've said. Grazing strategy, and get on a plane and go and have a look yourself. Obviously not right now, but when permitted. I'll finish there so that I don't run out of time, and yeah, if there are any questions, be nice. Thank you. You're on mute, Joe.
Brilliant, thank you, Charlie. That's fantastic. Really, that's a very big trip and a really succinct presentation. So thank you very much. Oh, look, now you just ruin it for all of us with those gorgeous pictures.
I know, it's mad. When you said 5 minutes, I was like, I'm going too quickly. I've not been talking for long enough, and then you put your hand up, and I was like, whoa.
No, that was really great. Thank you. Yeah, and it looks like you really had an absolutely fantastic time there. Just as a start, well, we'll just do a couple of questions for you now, Charlie. I've got various ones, but I want to I'll just do a couple now before we move on to Marie, and then we'll do some more questions at the end. But I just wanted to ask, to start off, if the trip had been the other way around, so you've gone out there and you've had a look at what they're doing, if someone from New Zealand your age had come back the other way, what do you think they would have been impressed at that we do that they don't do?
Oh, that's a really hard one. Can I come back to you on that one? Have a little think.
Yeah. I'll give you another one. So another question that's come in, just asking about the environmental concerns over there. Is it something that we always hear that they've got less constraints? Are there more coming in for them, do you think? I think it's something they're going to have to worry about more in the future.
Yeah, there's definitely more coming in with their current government. And also I personally always before I went out there, I thought, the Kiwis just aren't as focused on the environment as we are. It's a lot in different ways though. So they obviously have a lot of different issues. Waterways all fenced off. So, we've got cattle grazing on river meadows here, which I'm not proud of and would like to change that, but you should try fencing it for when it floods. Heck. They're not allowed livestock near waterways, so that's all fenced off. They've got a lot of government separate boards that can focus on the environment as well, but then there are things like them putting fertilizer onto sheer hills that, so it's just different. I wouldn't say it's less. It's just different.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then just quite a specific one around reseeding. What percentage, when you were out there and you were looking at what their reseeding policies were, what percentage were they typically aiming for? And did you have a look at what kind of establishment methods they were using?
Yeah, so most of them it varied. They were around 10%, 8-10%. I went to a couple of farms that were actually, rather than setting aside a set percentage, because most of them were saying, yeah, we want 8 or 10% to be reseeded every single year. And then I went to a couple that were like, right, well, some years 8 or 10% doesn't need reseeding. So rather than doing that, but then some years 15% might need reseeding. So they were a bit more flexible with it, and they'd earmark certain paddocks for it. And then if the conditions allowed, finances allowed, then they'd do it that way, which I thought was quite a nice way, because we all have to be so flexible in farming. And then what was the other half of that question? Oh, establishment methods. So it's minimum tillage. So some of the places they were reseeding are places that we would just never dream of trying to put a tractor over. So that, or putting forage crops down on the top of hills. I should have put a photo up of that actually. Like, it's just so that top photo of the chap with his dogs on the hills, they wouldn't think twice about finding the flat spots in that field, churning it up, tilling it up, and putting a forage crop in there. The places they tried to reseed us, it blew my mind slightly. But yeah, it was minimum till, and then either broadcast. So some places, if they couldn't get a tractor on, they'd be broadcasting seeds on by air. It completely varied, really. So
that probably brings us back on some of the questions about what they're allowed to do and we're not allowed to do. We'll park that for the minute, and we'll cross over to Marie. So if you want to take your presentation down, Charlie, and then
how do I?
You should have a red stop button at the top of your screen.
Oh yeah.
Great. So we complete change of tack now. We're going across to Marie, who stayed in the Northern Hemisphere. Her travels took her quite a bit within the UK actually, as well as also across to Norway and Iceland. Completely different topic as well. We're now onto wool, but I will let Marie outline what she got up to. And again, we'll do some questions.
Thanks, Jo, and thank you for sharing my slide thing, as I'm a bit of a technological dummy.
This is testing me. I'm trying to do multitasking now. So just so explain to that, I've got Marie's presentation on my computer, so I'm in charge of the slides. So we're going to have some really cringeworthy government coronavirus briefing type next slide, please. I'm afraid, but we'll manage. Right, okay, Marie, all yours.
Well done, Charlie. Morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us, and thank you, Stephen, from the Staple, joining us also, and for the opportunity. As Charlie said, what a brilliant opportunity we're both given, and what amazing timing it turned out to be able to go anywhere just at the end of 2019 before all the restrictions came in. We were certainly lucky. So let's hope, and it sounds hopeful, that the bursary will come back in next year once travel's allowed again. So that sounds great. So to just introduce myself, I'm sheep farming in Kent, farming Romneys. Like Charlie, we were tenant farmers, but been in the family since 1760. So a long history there, and sort of taken a full circle really approach with the sheep, because when I came into it, Dad just had a handful of Suffolk mules, and I basically said to him one day, there's going to be Romneys back on those hills, and sure enough, a few years later, I'd managed to get into Romneys, now sort of 500 ewes, back where we probably started back out with Romneys. So long history of farming and farming Romneys in Kent, obviously. So learnt to shear 10 years ago in New Zealand, and I'm glad I went out there to learn. Previously, I'd already been to New Zealand and worked on stations for sort of 6 months traveling around the country, which was an amazing experience, and returned to go shearing a few years later. Obviously, as Charlie's pointed out, New Zealand's a very, very different country, and their setups are on such a scale with huge wool sheds. It's not what we do here. So my intention with the study was to really look at the Northern Hemisphere and what our setups are here, and to draw some evidence for where we currently are at, and whether things might just need a little bit of a rethink going forward. So I travelled quite a lot in the UK, up to Scotland. I went to France, and eventually to Iceland and to Norway, which was amazing, somewhere I've always wanted to go. So brilliant to be able to go and have a look around out there. I also managed to get back out to Iceland this November, just gone. So at a time when no one was really going anywhere, I felt incredibly privileged to be going out to Iceland, and I was certainly the only tourist out there. And I was shearing out there for all of November. So I'm certainly not the first person to say any of this, and I won't be the last. And you know, I'm by no means an expert. I just have, you know, a bit of shearing experience. I would say I've always been a part-time shearer with the farm. I guess the farm has always sort of subsidised my shearing as it has been so far. But now I'm in a position to do. Certainly this year, I've scaled back on numbers on the sheep at home, in order that I can do more shearing, and I'm getting to a point with my shearing where actually it's the other way around, and I can start, you know, focusing on that enterprise of my business, and it can start bringing in some more money, rather than the farm just subsidising the shearing as a hobby. But yeah, just always sort of been a part-timer, but always at whatever level you're at, you know, and it's a common theme, I think, for shearers to want to be the best that they can within the industry, and that's certainly at the moment. You know, there's a lot of training courses going on, and it's great to see. But look, I understand from the shearing perspective and the farmer's perspective, there's an ideal world, and then there's reality. And just to understand what with the study, my intention was to kind of understand some of the practical and perceived barriers to best practice, from both sides, and just kind of to look if there's any underlying issues there, and there might be sort of long-term recurring themes really, and we know that from going around shearing what we find, just to maybe put together some practical solutions, and certainly to stimulate discussion was my intention. Like, I don't have all the answers by any means, and I'm certainly not the first person to say any of this, but at the time I applied for the awards, we just had, unfortunately, a bit of bad press in the shearing industry. PETA got hold of some video footage, and I'm not going to dwell on it, but obviously we know that, you know, one one negative, one bad egg can actually damage the reputation of a whole industry. So in response to that, I think NSA, there was joint industry guidance from NSA, NFU, British Wool and NAAC on best practice in the run-up to shearing, both for shearers and for farmers. So I looked at that as a starting point. And yeah, so with the PETA footage coming out, you know, it's by no means suggesting that there's a wider problem in the industry. Certainly in the UK, you know, we can be proud that we have the highest standards of anywhere, but we have to keep reinforcing that positive messaging instead of dwelling on a problem. You know, let's keep promoting what we do well. So this is my opportunity to look at things for how they are, and to start that discussion. So if you can move on to the next slide, please, Joe. So a bit of an introduction to the study in terms of the methodology for how I went about it. I wrote 2 questionnaires, one for shearers and one for farmers. And thank you to anyone on here who replied. I had over 180 responses to the farmer survey and 90 from shearers, which was, you know, really good, and it gave me a pool of evidence there that I could draw some common themes out from. And there certainly were, you know, it became quite evident that within the shearing industry in the UK, you know, there might not always be those optimal conditions, and it's a case of understanding what that best practice might be, and, you know, if there's evidence even that it's feasible to make any changes, given the weather, given, you know, practical changes that would be required, given the fact that, well, certainly since I started writing the report, everything changed. We went from, you know, everything looking fairly normal to suddenly a global pandemic, no overseas shearers coming in, and the wool price crashing out. So as I went through my study and you know, as I was writing it, everything was changing so much. It's a hard sell to suggest any changes at a time when wool price obviously isn't covering the cost of shearing for most people, or for nearly everyone this year. But the survey data was a useful starting point, and just getting in behind those decision making, the decision making of shearers and farmers. Obviously, it doesn't represent the whole industry, just survey data I had, but it's a good starting point. Next slide, please, Joe. So I needed to define what best practice meant, and I landed on 4. Well, they became the chapters of my report. So 4 subject areas within that theme of best practice. So the first being, and I'm just going to outline all of them now in this presentation. So the first being presentation of sheep for shearing, biosecurity, handling facilities, and wool handling. So without going into too much detail on any of them, I will just touch on those. So the first subject being how we present sheep for shearing. So I needed to define what was meant by correct presentation. So I came up with correct presentation for shearing being fasted, crutched, dry sheep held in a suitable yard designed to minimize stress to the animals. And I did reference, and there's a link there for anyone who wants to look at it, WorkSafe New Zealand guidelines, which were published, I don't remember which year, but they did a lot of trials that found fasting used with lambs at up to 30 hours has no impact on lamb growth rates or weaning weight, and also weaned lambs, you can fast for up to 24 hours off feed, it won't have any negative impact on their growth rates or eventual carcass weights. The same study showed that 75% of gut fill was emptied only after 12 hours. Obviously, their New Zealand trials, it would be really very useful if we had some science from the UK. So there's certain points within my report where I signposted further work that would be useful to support some of the things I was talking about. So this is definitely one of the areas where it would be great to have some UK trials done and provide a bit of science behind the need for fasting sheep. In the guidance document, there's a link there. that came out, understandably, what I say as an individual and what industry can publish is essentially two different things. But within that guidance document, there was a suggestion that penning sheep without feed for at least 4 hours before shearing, or housing and yarding them overnight with access to dry food and water, was sufficient prior to shearing. Now, we know from trials actually in the UK, there were some studies done that looked at different types of fodder through the digestive system. We know that it actually takes a lot longer than 4 hours, and certainly that dry food is more slowly digested than wet matter. So it actually takes longer to empty the gut full of a sheep that's been fed hay overnight, for example, than one that's just come straight in off grass. So that was a point of that I sort of contested within my report, and also that obviously the 4 hours, I came to claim that actually we need to look at 12 hours as being the suggested minimum time off food and water prior to shearing. Obviously, industry is probably not in a place to suggest leaving sheep without water at all, but it's certainly something to be looked at. There might be issues to do with cross-sector guidance. So what legislation is in there for transportation is different from what we're suggesting. So to bring everything into line, that will obviously need a little bit more work, but it's just an area that I think needs a little bit more clarification. So from my survey data, it became very obvious that shearers are more often than not shearing full sheep and sometimes wet sheep, but the issue of full sheep is certainly prevalent in the industry in the UK, with the main response from farmers on that subject being that they don't have room or facilities to empty them out, and also that a quarter of the farmers that responded said that they don't actually understand the importance of emptying sheep out prior to shearing, which is twofold there. So not having the room and facilities, and then just the issue of knowledge transfer, so between shearers and farmers and across the industry. If you can move on to the next slide, Joe, thank you. So without driving it home in too much detail, but what is our problem with shearing full sheep? Basically, it's been calculated that a used gut, full gut weighs 20% constitutes 20% of her body weight. So if we're talking 80 kilo ewes, for example, even if I'm only doing 200 a day, that's still over 3 ton extra on top of what I would already be turning over and shearing. That's an extra 3 ton just on an 80 kilo ewe. Bearing in mind, we know that there's plenty of over 100 kilo ewe sheep out there. Imagine asking a farmer at the end of a day shearing to haul a few ton bags of fertilizer around without a tractor. It's a matter of making, reducing the physical load on the shearer, for sure. It's a big one. And equally, pastured sheep definitely, from personal experience and from anecdotal evidence that I drew from the report and just knowing people in the industry, we know that sheep that are fasted definitely sit more comfortably and struggle less when they're shorn. Everything comes back to animal welfare. Every decision we make basically has to be referenced to animal welfare. So sheep that are struggling and shearers that are then struggling with those sheep, it's just not good for the image, is it? So anything we can do to make the job easier. Equally, full sheep run straight in off grass on a hot day in the summer are likely to be those that could be susceptible to a twisted gut or a heart attack. So everything we do, as I've said, really just needs to be making the job easier and more efficient. The other issue with full sheep, of course, is that they're defecating all over the board. So you're pulling out, from a pen. It's very likely that you'll slip and trip, and with a 100 kilo ewe on your hands, it's just dangerous. That's what it comes down to. And equally, there's a risk of infection, zoonotic diseases. So yeah, bottom line being that full sheep is bad for animal and for human health. There's basically some fairly entry-level practical solution to the issue of full sheep. Look, I know as a farmer, when I've been the one shearing my own sheep is one thing, but when I've had shearers coming in, yeah, it definitely does take a bit more time and a bit more thinking through and a bit more planning. So to get sheep in the night before, with their lambs, early in the season they've still got fairly young lambs on them. It's a logistical challenge, and I completely get that, and it definitely takes a lot more time. And you're looking at setting up and getting organised the day before, rather than just considering shearing a one day only event. Trying to see the bigger picture, I guess. But the solution, quite honestly, in an ideal world, yes, we'd all have slatted sheds and covered yards, or at least a dirt or chalk floor to be able to empty sheep out onto. But in the UK, a lot of farmers, don't have sheds or covered yards of any description, whether that's in a hill situation or on the Bromley Marsh where it's completely exposed. But even within that, I tried to make the point in the study that just the corner of a field that has been grazed down tight a few days before shearing, so it's got, it's bare cover. The day before shearing, a few days before, you've grazed it right off, and then the day before shearing, you're able to just mob up your ewes and gather them, is sufficient, really. It's certainly preferable to running them straight in off grass. So trying to make some practical suggestions for how these things can be improved. The next issue, the one of biosecurity, if you could move on, thanks, Jo.
I'm just move on, and you've not got a huge amount of time left. Probably got about 4 minutes or so. So
okay, all right. I'll do what I can.
And then do your travel pictures, maybe.
Yeah. Okay. So the issue of biosecurity, I guess we can all put our hand up and say there are corners cut, and we possibly don't take it as seriously as we should. Interestingly, in Iceland, and we can't really compare ourselves to it, but they have divided the country into zones where they don't move any livestock between these zones, and it's highly controlled. They don't have any livestock markets. That's the extreme end of things. But what can we all do to reduce the risk to our own businesses, for example, of bringing a disease in? In the UK, most shearing is done on trailers, and most shearers obviously go between farms in a day. And the survey evidence that I brought into the report said that 84% of shearing contractors just don't disinfect their equipment between farms, and farmers aren't providing disinfectant for those shearers. So there's obviously a lot of room for improvement. I'm going to point out here that we don't know, in terms of actual evidence, of what can be directly attributed to shearing from scab and such diseases. But let's look at precautionary principle. Let's try and just make things better, and protect all of our own businesses and the industry more widely. Certainly there's work there to be done on sort of cost benefit analysis of various practical measures. So a few farmers I know, they keep a pair of moccasins for me at their farm. So that's one very low cost solution potentially. Some might even consider building a yard themselves. But we'll move on to the next slide onto that issue of infrastructure. So as I've said, all infrastructure needs to just be designed to optimize sheep moving through the system and to lessen the stress on the animals. But I get the issue that shearing basically is considered one day a year. So why, especially now when wool's worth nothing, it's a hard sell. How can we expect anyone to build something that's basically used for one day only? Well, it isn't really one day only, because at the moment we're in the middle of winter trying to dag sheep. Well, it's wet, and actually if something's well designed, it can be used. So some of these covered yards are actually well designed for farmers to be able to use throughout the year as well. So for with the race drenching lambs and all the rest of it. So there's grant funding available for mobile yards, but maybe it's something we need to push for, to have some more infrastructure looked at, to be part of the suite of new kind of animal health options. I will skip over that because we're running out of time. Look at some photos on the next slide. Typical mobile shearing trailer. B and C are all on the same farm. We can't all be expected to build, high-end bespoke shearing sheds. I get that. That's just, that's not realistic. But but what can we do? If you look at just image E there, that was a modular shearing stand that I saw at the World Champs in France. And it would just be interesting to see how much something like that would cost, and whether farmers would be interested in that as a solution potentially to mobile trailers that could go around between different farms. And F there is just in Iceland, where they house sheep right through from November till May, obviously all on slats there. The next slide, Joe, thank you. And there's a few of these graphs throughout my report, which this basically shows that the decision making becomes difficult when you set up for shearing, for example, and you're getting towards the end of the day and then the rain comes in. You're not going to necessarily pack up and leave, but equally, if you turn up at the beginning of the day and there's obviously issues, what are your options as a shearer? Do you bring the issues to the farmer's attention and carry on, or do you just carry on and not say anything? Do you pack up and leave and make that decision, or do you shear anyway and add a fee to the bill? It's understanding that decision making, and certainly I'm not here to point the finger at anyone from and there's issues, but not all of them can be solved very easily. Quickly moving on, just the issue of wool. In the UK, what we produce is only 2% of the global market. Are there things that we can do to make ourselves more competitive on the global market? Well, we produce a huge variation in quality of wool in the UK, not just because of the breeds of sheep that we have, which is obviously vast, but on the quality and the wool handling. I'm not going to go into very much detail here because we haven't got time, but obviously at the moment, the wool price now, looking back through history, when the guaranteed price of 125 was dropped, and the wool price fell to just 33p a kilo. I mean, that's really, and that was 1992, that's kind of where we're at. There are a lot of amazing businesses around the UK that have diversified their sheep enterprise to be doing more with the wool. Local to me, we've got Romney Marsh Wools, who are doing everything from hats to blanket to lanolin hand cream, and it's amazing to see it. There's a lot to be talked about here, and I don't think we have time to go into it. I'm happy to take questions on it. But there's a lot of reasons why the wool price isn't covering shearing costs at the moment, but it's sort of just encouraging us to have the discussion and to look at the bigger picture, instead of just, we can't control what the wool price is doing, but what can we do? Okay, I'll move on to the next slide, Joe. I think we need to keep moving. So Iceland and Norway was really, really interesting. Just to be very clear, both governments subsidise wool production. So farmers receive a payment each year that is guaranteed to cover the cost of shearing. And that shearing cost is actually 3 times higher. So I was earning pretty good money in Iceland in November when I went back to shear, and that is subsidised by the government. So we definitely don't have that model here, but they definitely have a stronger connection with wool as part of their culture. Certainly in Iceland, the iconic jumpers, I'm wearing one now. I basically kept the Icelandic economy going through COVID by spending all of my money on wool when I was out there. But it's definitely a big part of their culture, and without sheep, they would have been starving. So it's still very much still has its place. Shearing out there is like nothing else. I mean, it's not great for the image. The sheep are just instinctively and genetically so wild, despite being housed from November to May. These sheep just kick and bite you the whole way just because they've just been brought off the hills. They're pretty mad. So there are things that we can learn from it. There's certainly ways that it shows that the UK is doing things pretty well. Norway, if you just move on, Joe, thank you. Just a few pictures there of a typical shed, probably a little bit higher end than the Icelandic ones, which were a bit dingy. These are, this is pretty heavy investment actually. A lot of farms have got these sheds, and even in the slaughterhouses where they're shearing, wool handlers are traveling from overseas as skilled professionals to be grading and sorting the wool at the time of shearing. There's 16 quality classifications for Norwegian wool, so everything's just done very properly to a high standard. And farmers actually, especially in Norway, are very serious about their wool, basically because they're getting a premium payment for the higher quality fibres and downgraded for anything of the, for example, of the back legs. That's all separated. And there's now wool handling courses in Norway being run for farmers who are pretty keen to improve their own business and their wool. Just move on. Just touching the last slide, pretty much is just a point for discussion. Basically, there are no professional qualifications required to become a shearer anywhere in the world. In the UK, we're certainly leading on the area of shearing training. Over 800 people in 2019 went through a British wool course. So you come out of that with a certificate, whether you're a blue seal right up to a gold seal. And now there's a lot more higher level training coming in as well, which can only be a good thing. You know, within the industry, your competency as a shearer is only judged on your own merit and by others in the industry. So sort of driving your own performance and wanting to do the best that you can is the way forward. But certainly in the UK we're well placed to deliver and lead on training and potentially, you know, providing certificates to shearers and wool handlers that can then travel the world, knowing that the UK is based very highly on the animal welfare front, which can only be a good thing for our industry, both for wool and sheep more generally, to show that we have got the highest skills. I mean, it became very obvious this year that we didn't have any overseas shearers come in, but nevertheless, you know, the UK workforce got the job done very efficiently. So we certainly can be proud of that, and something that's a great message to be promoting at the moment. And just in summary, just the last slide, Joe. So what did I learn? I learned a lot. Certainly made me think about my own business, both from the farming and the shearing perspective. I'm going to be deciding whether to sell my old race trailer. I've just spent £6,500 on a new one. That's very easy to set up and much more suitable for making the job efficient. I know I've got to be careful who I offend here because I've got at least one of my shearing customers listening, but certainly in terms of biosecurity, I either need a permanent yard for myself at home or leave my old race trailer set up, just so that I haven't got the issue of going between farms and bringing something back home which I don't want to bring home. Unfortunately, I had that experience from not from shearing, but from badly managed fences from the neighbour. I had a run-in with scab through my lambs a couple of years ago, and that was certainly enough to make me really, really think about how I went about my shearing and just being the cleanest that I could in terms of disinfecting between farms and just, you know, putting my money where my mouth was and actually doing some of these things, just so I know, like, hand on heart, that I'm not posing a threat to anyone else's farming business. Certainly some of my decision making is driven by me being a shearer. Fortunately, in a year where breeding ewes have been fetching plenty of money, it was a good decision to make from a farming perspective as well. But yeah, deciding to sell a few sheep that had black wool was certainly the shearer in me. But you know, we have to control what we can control. So just taking ownership of our own decision making, I think, is really important, and keep encouraging throughout the industry. Just keep driving high standards. You know, and for me personally, that's about keep training, keep learning, and encouraging others to do the same. I've really skimmed over a lot of this. I appreciate we haven't had a chance to go into everything in much detail, and I certainly don't have all the answers. I'm no expert, but I'm happy to take questions. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Marie. And yeah, he wanted to cut you off, so we're keeping to our time scale, but there was such good quality in there that I was absolutely torn. But thank you, and I appreciate you have crammed a lot in there. And we'll go on a question specifically for you first. But before I say that, we have had a question just coming up about the reports that Charlie and Marie have both mentioned, and they have both written reports, and they're on the NSA Next Generation website under the travel bursary section. but when we put this webinar up on our website, the recording of this webinar up on the website, I will make the PowerPoint presentations available and also those reports again, so there'll be a lot more detail in there for folks that want it. A question for you then, Marie, specifically on the shearing side of things. Did you pick up any conclusive links between the value of wool and the effort made to improve shearing conditions and welfare?
In the UK,
Well, in all your travels.
Yeah, I think the farmers that are trying to do a good job with their wool are certainly more likely, whether it's because they're creating products and selling those, you know, from an online website, whatever, but they're definitely generating a bit more money on the scale of wool not being worth anything at the moment. Those ones that are actually trying to make an effort certainly more likely to be in a better position at the moment. And it's just about, like we said, controlling what we can control. But yeah, and I guess not moaning about a subject that we can't do anything about necessarily, either trying to do something about it or changing the way we think about it.
Okay. Now, obviously, with the two topics being so different, I don't have questions I can pose to both of you. So we'll flip back to grass for a bit, just because we have had quite a big chunk there on Marie's study on the wool side of things. Charlie, some questions now on going back to yours. Do you find that when you're in New Zealand that they were more or less advanced in terms of the soil quality and grassland and the importance of soil quality and soil life and its link with both productivity and climate change?
Oh, that's a hard one. More so, I don't know. Maybe a higher proportion of the farmers in New Zealand were more in touch with their soils than maybe we see in the UK, but then that's growing all the time. So, and I think I don't think it's more so. I don't think there's more, especially with the link to climate change and the importance of soil with carbon capture and whatnot. I don't think more farmers in New Zealand. I think that's fairly equal. Yeah.
Okay then.
That's a hard one.
And we've still got to come back to you about the other hard one that you had earlier. I'm not gonna forget that one. Marie, back onto the shearing there. I think you perhaps already covered this, but we've had a question about CPD, so continuous professional development for shearers. You were saying there isn't a formal qualification anywhere in the world. Are there any kind of CPD schemes in either Iceland or Norway that you saw when you were out there?
There has been a couple of training courses in Iceland, but as far as I know, I was the only overseas shearer in Iceland this November just gone. Most of the shearing in Iceland is done by farmers themselves. So as much as they're keen to learn, you know, there's a lot of varying skill set there. So it is good to be over there and potentially, you know, I might run a few courses or take some more experienced shearers over to run some courses. In Norway, they're definitely running more courses, both on the wool handling and the shearing. But you know, in the UK, we really are leading the way. What's going on in New Zealand with training at the moment is pretty interesting. But there's more discussion, and I know Richard Schofield at British Wool is keen to, you know, come up with a piece of paper, basically a certificate that says I've trained in the UK to this standard, and maybe farmers will also be able to, you know, wave that piece of paper at the likes of Red Tract or whoever might start looking at this as a real welfare issue and say, look, what we're doing is delivering training to a really high standard, and that will benefit the sheep industry in general.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, in terms of that public perception, which you're kind of touching on there, Marie. We've got the issue of shearing, where quite often we're thrust into the public eye in quite a negative way, or have been on a couple of instances where Petra have really got the wind in their sails about it. But then we've got grassland, Charlie, where we really would love the public to appreciate actually that this green stuff they just see in the field is actually quite an incredible asset that they should be taking more advantage of. In New Zealand, I mean, we always hear that their public is smaller, there's fewer of them and they're less discerning. Are they trying to push that message about the positives of grassland?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's easier for them as well, like you say, smaller population. There seems to be less of a distance between the consumer and the farmer in New Zealand. There's farms everywhere in New Zealand, they're all over the place. like even their cities, they're just not the urban sprawls that we have here. So I think they've got an easier job of it. Yeah, but they are definitely highlighting that. So in the same way that a lot of farmers over here are, you know, there's a lot of it's on social media. There's a lot of farmers doing a great job in promoting the fantastic work that we do, whether it be individual farmers or NSA, Farmers Weekly, anything like that. So similar ways to the way we are here, but yeah, they're definitely pushing it.
Yeah, good. There's positive, plenty of positives really, to be dwelling on in both presentations. And I thank you both. There's so many more questions. I've barely scratched the surface in the questions that have been popping up on the Q&A. So sorry for everyone whose questions we have got to, but I am going to keep tracking on in the interest of time. And you'll see that the panel has suddenly expanded. We've got Stephen Fell from the Staple who's joined us, and Edward Adamson from NSA. I'm just going to ask both of them to make some really brief comments. From Stephen, in terms of the Staples' involvement in this award and allowing Charlie and Marie to do their travels, and then to Edward, who was a very close friend and colleague of Samuel, just to say a few words to sum up as well. So Stephen, over to you.
Thank you, Jo. Well done, Charlie and Marie. I have to say, Marie, I'm rather envious sitting in a freezing cold Yorkshire of your lovely looking jumper. I could do with one of those. But you've both had a really great experience and have been good ambassadors for our industry, from what I can see. The fact that you were welcomed with open arms by your various hosts shows the great advantages of going away as a recognised scholar supported by the NSA and the Staple. The Staple's got an intriguing history in the wool trade going back to the 1100s, but now has a mainly charitable function. And we were very keen to put funds towards helping young people in the sheep sector to give them that invaluable experience of travel with the discipline and instill the discipline of producing a report and bringing back some pertinent, up-to-the-minute ideas and recommendations for the industry, as you both have. You know more about that subject than probably anybody else at the moment, so now's a good time to get those messages out. We will be making another award in the future whenever we can, and look forward to some great applicants wanting to experience some of the things that Charlie and Marie have. And I would say, don't worry about the topic, we'll help you with that. This is really about developing people, so have a go. Okay.
Excellent work, Stephen. Really great. Thank you. Edward.
Well, first of all, I want to repeat what Jo said at the beginning and thank Stephen and the Staple for their generosity. It made the bursary so much more worthwhile. The two topics, not by design, it was by accident. They're so diverse that the two, we can listen to both speakers and know that neither are going to overlap with the other. So that was very useful. I don't know whether any of the two girls knew Samuel or not, or met Samuel. Marie probably doesn't remember, but she had breakfast over the table at the Sheep Breeders' Round Table one time with Samuel.
I certainly remember Sam because of being an ambassador, and he was amazing. He was completely amazing. Such an inspiration.
Yeah, it is good to see that anybody who does know Samuel knows that his enthusiasm, and it always seemed to rub off, and even Charlie hasn't met him. I think that the enthusiasm for the industry has rubbed off onto them both. Their reports, I would urge anyone who hasn't read them on the NSA website should go and read them. It didn't give either of the girls justice today, just some 20 minutes. So be good if you could go and read it and encourage others to read the reports. They're quite modest about their reports, but I'm sure Samuel would be very proud to have his name associated with them. They have take-home messages for probably all of us, and if some of those take-home messages are implemented, it will be good for the industry. So to both girls, Charlie and Marie, well done and thank you.
Thank you. That's been great. So just to reiterate, everyone, yeah, we haven't scratched the surface with this at all. So the reports are already up on the NSA Next Generation website. You'll find that it's there already. And then as soon as we've got this recording up on the website with the presentations, the reports will be there as well. So that's nationalsheep.org.uk/webinars. And make sure you come in next week for the Breakfast Club. Next week, 8:30 next Wednesday, we've got Tony Juniper joining us from Natural England. So a completely different topic, but another interesting one. And I hope you've all enjoyed today. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your days. Bye for now.
Thank you. Bye.